Love Yours, an experimental podcast. Welcome back to Love Yours. I'm Charlotte Chidera. I'm your host, and this is season 3. Jeez, we're really getting through these books, aren't we? So, if you're brand new to Love Yours, it is an experimental podcast where I get books from Black authors and read them while applying them to my life and circumstances. And the plan is you read along with me, enjoying the book, and hopefully through my learnings and sharings you also use this podcast as almost like a complimentary addition to assess how you're doing in your personal life. I think I explained that all right, but that's basically the summary of it. I pick a book from a Black author, read it, and document my journey of reading it and applying it to my life through this podcast. If that doesn't make any sense, drop me a message and we'll have a chat about it. So in the last 2 seasons of Love Yours, we've covered my journey to self-love, and we've also covered my journey to loving my finances, which is an ongoing journey, honestly. And in season 3, I have picked the amazing Chidera Eggerue, aka the Slumflower, What a Time to Be Alone, the Slumflower's Guide to Why You Are Already Enough. Now, this book and this season's going to be different. Up until now, I've used each chapter as an episode, but this book has no chapters. So it's going to be a bit more techie when reading along. It hasn't even got page numbers. So I can't even tell you this episode's from page 12 to page 19. So what I suggest is go ahead and read the book and listen to the podcast simultaneously. But if you get ahead of me or if you're a little behind me, no stress. Okay, we don't need to be exactly at the same point in each episode. We just need to be applying what we read to our lifestyles. And I picked this book off the advice of a really good friend of mine, because she knows and I know 2022 was one of the loneliest years of my life. I'm always surrounded by people, whether that's friends or family or colleagues or acquaintances. But for some reason in 2022, I felt like I was the only person in the world. So this season's going to be all about relationships, not just intimate relationships. I mean work relationships, friend relationships, family relationships, and of course the romantic relationships. So to summarize some of my relationships, I have a very strained relationship with both of my parents. My dad at the moment I'd say is the most strained, and my mum I would say was strained the longest, but in recent times of me becoming a mother, it's definitely got to the strongest position it's ever been in. As far as my siblings, and obviously they may debate this, I feel like I'm the sibling who makes the most effort equally with all of the siblings. So some of my siblings live abroad, but I still make equal amounts of effort with them. I definitely have my favourite sibling I won't share, but generally I try to stay in touch with all my siblings. Friends, before 2022, I would say I've probably got about 10 solid friends. Now it's closer down to 5. For me, I take my friendships very seriously, and so if I feel that you are not being a true friend to me, you will become an acquaintance. Colleagues, I manage a team of, God, it's changing every day. At the moment, it's around like 9 people, and I work in a broader company with like 100 people who work in a broader company with thousands of people. But day to day, I would say I interact closely with about 12 to 15 colleagues. And that doesn't include all the colleagues I work with, obviously, but that's like the main numbers. Acquaintance and associates, thousands. I can't give a number, honestly. I'm a very sociable person, and I also used to be out a lot on my own. So by force, I made more acquaintances. And so I have thousands of acquaintances. I'm going to do my best to kind of, whenever I'm talking about someone who's in my life or who has been in my life, keep their identity a bit anonymous. So for family and friends, that'll be really easy because I'm one of 10 siblings. So I'll just say my brother, my sister, and you won't really know which one I'm talking about. Obviously parents, that goes out the window a little bit. For friends, I'll just say my friend, and for colleagues, I'll just say my colleagues. I'm not trying to get sacked, or I'm not trying to cause drama at work. As far as my intimate relationships, I feel like I can break them down into 2 categories. And to quote Sex and the City, I'm going to call my more serious relationships my core shakers. Someone who comes into your life and completely shakes it to the core, to where afterwards you're no longer the same person. I would say in my lifetime I've had 3/4, maybe 5. Can't tell if they were a core shaker. I mean, they did change my world, but I would say 4 to 5 core shakers. So those are people who I've been in a long-term relationship with. And I'm going to call all the other dating experience, from a casual chat to one date to a few dates that didn't lead to much, I'm going to call them casuals. So when I'm referring to my intimate relationships, I will say, so my casual or my core shaker. And that's how you know the difference. But back to the book, What a Time to Be Alone. What's so funny is on one of the first few pages it says, What a Time to Be Alone is a book by a recovering hypocrite. It's here to remind you that no matter where you find yourself in life, you will always have to face your truth. All of it. You're not alone. You're not crazy. Your feelings are valid, and it's time to make peace with them. All of them. From the moment you open this book, it is such a unique design, and it's dedicated to her mum. How cute is that? She said, who effortlessly yet intentionally led me to myself. The book's divided into 3 sections, you, them and us. The pages in this book really vary, literally page to page. Some of them are quotes, some of them are whole pages of text, some of them are illustrations. So this is going to be really interesting to follow. Now, when I think of relationships, I would say that at one point I was very open about my relationships on social media. And from pretty early in the journey, all through to, being pregnant and getting married and having my daughter River Tahira, and then living life as new parents, and then getting pregnant with Rio and having Rio. Like, it's all kind of documented online. And in 2023, despite getting married, despite starting a family, I find myself alone, which is fine. I would say I've never been a fan of being alone. I think from as young as 14, I've consistently either been dating or in a relationship. That is a long amount of time. But definitely since becoming a parent, being alone is like the biggest blessing you can ask for some days. Just silence, just having a moment to drink that cup of tea without someone pulling at your leg or moaning at what you haven't done or asking for something. So I've been single just over half a year, officially, I would say. But I've felt single for a few years. Not to say I've acted single for a few years, but it's really mad when you feel lonely in a relationship. Out of a relationship, that's so normal, but in a relationship, looking back on it is kind of a sign of why did this separation take so long? Anyways, I'd say I got my first casual age 13. We stayed together for a couple of years, actually. I barely seen him because he lived quite far away and I was so young. But I definitely remember the impact it had on my relationship with my dad, because his biggest fear had come to reality of me dating someone. And then around 15, I met this guy who, looking back on it, another casual, I definitely wasn't really attracted to him. But he was so into me that at that time, my self-confidence was so low that I was just really happy that someone kind of liked me. And so I kind of made him my boyfriend. It was definitely a casual boyfriend because it didn't last very long, because my first core shaker stole me from him. I've talked about him briefly on season 1, this core shaker. But basically, he was frenemies with my first casual, and he promised that he was going to steal me from him, and he did. And we ended up being together 2 years. But that 2 years was full of plenty of tears. Within that 2 years, I had 3 miscarriages for him. I also lost my virginity to this first core shaker. And at that time, he was everything to me. He was my whole world. But after the miscarriages and him being a complete prick, I kind of started that's the thing about women. We really come out of a relationship before we actually leave that person. And so I remember I was in that process of kind of detaching myself from him and trying to get over him before we properly broke up. And then I bumped into what I would say is definitely my second core shaker. He went to my primary school and he was in my brother's year, and I always thought he was so cute, even when I was in primary school. And he probably didn't really remember me from primary school because I was such a tomboy. But turns out he actually had a crush on me too. So me and him started going out, and honestly, wow, how old was I then? I must have been about 17. Our core shaking romance began. And that lasted on and off for about 4 years. I mean, our relationship was so dramatic. And looking back on it, it was very toxic. There was a lot of love there, but there wasn't much trust. And the communication was very immature. I mean, we was teenagers, but that love felt so intense. That love was the all-consuming, take over your soul love. And I feel like we were both very invested in each other in general. Like, we was always just there for each other when shit hit the fan. Even after we'd broken up, I remember he even moved me into my uni house. So as much as we wasn't together, there was definitely still a connection. But like I said, that core shaker was a toxic one. We had some really high highs. Like, to this day, some of the biggest highs of my life. Maybe the timing was off. I don't know. So I was back being single at university, and I did date a casual in university in first year. But then there was this other kind of almost behind the scenes core shaker. I mean, it's interesting even telling the story how all these people in my life kind of overlap with each other. It just goes to show the fear I had in being alone, that as soon as I knew something was ending with someone else, I was kind of like, who's next? So this next semi-core shaker, can I say that? Does it sound dirty? We'd been friends for a while. At this point, we'd been friends for about 3 years. And I decided, let's try and take this to the next level and turn it into a relationship. But he was still very much kind of a player and didn't want to commit to anything serious. And then I remember he told me it was now my 3rd year of university, and I am about to go traveling in America for the whole summer with Camp America. And I asked him to wait for me, and he basically is like, nah. On my birthday as well. I literally went 2 days after my birthday, and the last day I seen him was my birthday. So I remember feeling so upset that he wasn't going to stay loyal while I was gone. Had a little meltdown, but do you know what? I was about to fly to the States. So I just focused all my energy on that, like being ready to like do this big summer in the States. And the good thing is I went to the States with the mindset of being single. And at Camp America, I met my next core shaker. So you know what they say about summer romances. But this summer romance was not just a summer romance. It actually ended up extending to a 2-year long distance relationship where I travelled back and forth between London and the States, and he travelled back and forth between London and the States, trying to make it work. But ultimately, what happened almost 2 years in is I realised I don't like long distance relationships. I'm very clingy, and I like to know my person is just around the corner, especially because my previous core shakers both lived within 20 minutes of my house, either walking or on a bus. And so basically, amidst this whole 2-year core shaker long distance relationship, my semi-core shaker, who didn't want to commit before I went to the States, was still trying to pursue me, knowing that I had a boyfriend. And long story short, one night, I basically kissed him. I think it was quite a desperate and lonely moment. And I felt so guilty that I literally called my long distance boyfriend instantly. And I remember sitting on the sofa, crying, telling him what happened, feeling so guilty, and knowing that this was kind of the beginning of the end for us. So that relationship, I think he visited me one more time in the UK. And although the trip went well, I think we both kind of knew that there was a lot of problems, even down to him saying he was going to move to the UK, and then when the time came, he just didn't. So that relationship ended. And part of me did think, well, now this has ended, maybe I should go back to this semi-core shaker. But I feel like because he didn't value me at the time, what I didn't want is to like accept him and take him on like to be my partner, and then him to act the same way because now he's kind of got what he wants. So the thrill of the chase isn't there anymore. So I was just single. I just started dating. I actually went on a lot of Tinder dates. Some of them trash, some of them okay. One of them seemed like it was going to go somewhere. One casual, but it stayed casual. So that's the answer to that. And for about a year I did that. For about a year I was dating on Tinder, and I started to get really fed up, to be honest. I think it's the longest time in my lifetime, from as young as 13, that I'd been single for. A year, which isn't even that long. But I remember getting to this next day, and I was like, I remember calling my friend at the time and being like, if this date is trash, you have to call me to get out. And also, if it's trash, I'm done dating. Like, I'm done. Like, I got so fed up of like shitty dates, basically. But luckily for this core shaker, it wasn't a bad date. In fact, we was the last people to leave. They were like last orders, and we were still there. And I thought I was only going to be there for a couple of hours. I remember going into that date with such low expectations and trying to be like the most relaxed version of myself, because I know I can hold a conversation. So I wanted to actually see, have they got the potential to hold a conversation with me? And that was my first date. Fast forward 7 years. I'm now separated with 2 kids, an ex-core shaker, and a lot of space in my life for love and companionship. I mean, a lot of this back and forth is going to just be confusing to you. Core shakers, casuals. I've only actually been with 10 people. And when I say been with, I don't do things by halves. So I mean, only 10 people in my life have been underneath my underwear. Put it that way. And I'm not putting that out there to show off. I know there's people sat listening to this who has 10 times as much people that I've been with, or 10 times less. I think everyone just needs to know, as long as you're happy and you're safe, like, numbers are just numbers. Obviously, my last core shaker didn't work out, so I'm going to get to number 11 eventually, aren't I? But the reason I gave you that very confusing summary of my dating history is because I've not been alone for a really long time. And as an adult, I've never really been alone. I mean, there's even people in my phone book saved as don't bother. Multiple people. And so the first time in 20 years, I really want to prioritize myself and my children. Because even before there was a guy, there was still just little old me. And from a really young age, I've always felt like my beauty is only validated when other people tell me it. My worth, my confidence. But actually, I've been through a load of fucking shit. And the fact that I'm still standing by myself, strong, I'm proud of myself. And so welcome to What a Time to Be Alone. I'm so excited to explore how I can be a better person to myself. I'm so excited to assess how different things impact different relationships. Obviously, we're going to be spilling some tea on the core shakers and the casuals, but also my relationships with my parents, with my siblings, with some of my closest friends, and even with my colleagues. Because a relationship is just a relationship across the board, but how it's impacting all depends on who that relationship is with, and how you allow yourself to be treated by that person. This is going to be an interesting one. So, 2 parents, 2 grandparents, 9 siblings, 5 friends, a whole hundreds of acquaintances, hundreds of colleagues, 4 core shakers, maybe 5, and a whole lot of casuals. Are you ready? So if you haven't already, get your copy, What a Time to Be Alone. Read the first few pages. Let me know what your thoughts are so far. Comment, share, follow, and we're going to really get into it in episode 2. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Love Yours, an experimental podcast